Hello, this is Richard Murphy on the 18th of May 2011, and I want to talk about inflation very briefly. I've just been talking about this on national radio and feel quite irritated about some of the comments that my opponent, Dr. Ros Altman of the Saga Group, said on the programme I've been discussing this issue on. Look, inflation is not an inherently good thing. We know that there are some merits to stability in an economy, and inflation can destabilise that condition. So of course inflation per se is not great, particularly when, as now, inflation is running ahead of wage rises, people's living standards are falling as a result, and so on. But on the other hand, at this point of time in our economy, to say that we should make inflation our number one priority would be absolutely absurd. The only weapon we have to tackle inflation at this moment is to increase interest rates. Let's consider the implication of increasing interest rates at this moment. First of all, we would immediately see an increase in the rates of interest charged within the UK economy. Most importantly, perhaps, we would see households charge more for their mortgages. Lots of households right across the country would see change, if not immediately, very soon when their rates were revised by their lenders. People would inevitably, as a consequence, react by reducing their spending, reducing demand even more than it has been reduced already as a result of mistaken government policies such as reducing VAT, which has itself created a large part of the inflation that we are facing. Increasing interest rates would also have a significant impact on small manufacturing businesses who do pay interest which is linked to base rates and whose costs would therefore go up. To be indifferent to either small manufacturing businesses or to the plight of those who have mortgages, whether or not they were wise to take those mortgages or not, is extraordinary, and yet that was exactly what Ros Altman was. She said it was the fault of those who borrowed and they should live with the consequences. Well, I don't agree with that. I'm extremely keen that people, their families, their children, stay in their houses and have stability in their lives at a time when a great deal else is uncertain. But it's more than just those issues as well. If we were to put up interest rates, we would probably increase the value of the pound. I agree. That would be bad for manufacturing. It would make it harder to sell British products abroad. We are dependent upon selling British products abroad. So that would be a bad thing. Our imports would be cheaper. As a result, we would see import substitution for UK labour. Unemployment would go up. That would be a bad thing for the UK economy. It would be a bad thing for government revenues. It would harm us in the long term. But more than that, a small increase in our exchange rate will not deal with the other fundamental cause of inflation in our economy at this point of time, apart from the VAT increase, the unnecessary VAT increase imposed on us by George Osborne. There are two real causes for inflation in this country at the moment. One is the increase in oil prices. That is worldwide. We have no control over it. And the second is the increase in commodity prices, such as wheat prices. That is worldwide. We have no control over it. Changing our exchange rate will have a marginal impact upon those prices, which have changed much more heavily than any impact our exchange rate has had upon them. As a result, we would simply be sacrificing jobs in this country, the chance of people living in their own homes in this country, the demand within the economy that keeps people working in this country, for the sake of trying to cut inflation in a way which would be guaranteed to fail. In other words, this would be an outright economic disaster. What's particularly strange about the policy of Ros Altman, who supposedly represents the interests of pensioners because she is the chief executive of the Saga Group, is this would be desperately bad for them as well. Pensioners are more dependent upon the state than anyone else. They need the NHS. They need social services. They need care provision. They need their state old age pension. Deny the government the revenues that comes to pay for those things because you tip the UK economy into recession by increasing interest rates, and pensioners may actually be amongst the hardest hit by increasing interest rates now. They would not benefit. A tiny proportion would get a very little extra income on their bank deposits, which are paying very small amounts now, I readily admit. but at a price of poverty for everyone, and quite possibly poverty for even those who hold bank deposits. The outcome of all of this would be an outright disaster for the UK. Inflation is not great. I do not like people's living standards being reduced by inflation. I do not like seeing people have below inflation pay rises. I don't want that situation to persist. I'm obviously interested in people being paid a fair reward for their labour. But when we have a desperately difficult choice, keep people at work, keep some chance of economic revival in our economy going, or supposedly tackle, inflation, using a method which is bound to fail, the choice is obvious. We do not increase interest rates now. We mustn't. If we did, it would be a disaster. I'm glad to see that the Monetary Policy Committee agree. I think that the majority who do agree with my sentiment will be increased as a result of recent changes in the membership of that committee. And if that's true, then we do at least have some prospect of economic stability. And those who think that dealing with inflation is the number one priority can be put very firmly where they are, back in their box, back in the insanity of neoliberal economics, which makes this the number one mantra of what is all that is bad according to them, when actually inflation is only harmful to the very wealthy at the end of the day in most cases. And instead we have a priority for the 62 million people who live in this country who are in this altogether, and we aren't going to have a policy designed for the very few who consider theirs is the only interest that counts.